Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Andrei Karpathy famously came up with the term vibe coding for coding by just typing in prompts and then getting the results that you got out of it and not really looking at the code, but just running it and seeing if it worked. Well, I have sort of an analogous thing called vibe designing that I've been doing for a couple of different projects, and I wanted to walk you through it. I'm going to use a hypothetical project instead of a real one, but what we're going to do is develop a series of web pages that we might have to advertise a game, and I'm not even going to try to figure out how to describe the game, although I think I came up with a pretty fun one. Anyway, I'm going to use Claude and ChatGPT because these two tools allow you to actually run code like HTML in a preview sort of browser window, and so I think those two are useful. Grok and Gemini at this point do not, as far as I understand it, so if they do, let me know because it might be different than I think. But I just find these very useful because I can inline run things and sort of check on it. So anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is I just want a nice description for a Diablo type game that's more or less based on Dante's Inferno, with the player having to descend through the circles of hell to meet the final boss. It should be a point of view game with interesting Renaissance weapons to choose from and an interesting flawed main character player we control. So I'm just going to use Claude 4 Opus because I find it kind of creative. I like the way that it actually speaks about things, and I'm going to use this as the basis. Now you could argue, hey, we could use Squarespace or Wix or something like that and use a template, but the idea here is that we want something that's different from a template. I'm going to want to develop, first of all, a color palette for the web page, and then we're going to generate some sample images, even though that's not particularly important, and then we're going to design out the web pages that we need to be able to actually build out our website. Now, the difference between this and vibe coding is that this is design. We're just designing the web page. We're showing what the web pages would look like. We're not worried about the functionality at all at this point. It's just the look and feel of the web pages. So like I said, this is a corollary to vibe coding, because then you could use vibe coding to actually go in and make these pages functional and actually do something. But at this point, we're just looking at the design. We're trying to look as a designer would. And I have spent many years as a sound and media designer, and I teach that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm fairly good to walk you all through this. This is a process that if I did this, even with a small team of developers, like 4 or 5 people, it could take us weeks to do this. So I'm hoping that I'm going to get something pretty decent really quickly, and I can show you just how fast you can vibe design with these tools. All right, so we've got Purgatorio, the Heretic's Descent. I don't like Purgatorio because I think it should actually be Inferno, although Purgatorio does allow for some salvation, maybe. All right, so anyway, dark action RPG. You embody Lucrezia Torriani, a disgraced Renaissance alchemist and excommunicated scholar who deliberately damns herself to hell in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Ooh, cool. I hadn't thought about a female primary character because in Dante's Inferno, of course, I think it's a male that's going through. Anyway, core gameplay, isometric hack and slash combat, alchemical crafting system. That's kind of cool, so you can build things. I like the builder idea. The 9 circles gameplay, so you're descending down the circles of hell, and each one should get worse and worse, I guess. And then the Renaissance arsenal and the flawed protagonist, and quite honestly, at this point, I actually want to develop this game. If anybody wants to build this game with me using some vibe coding and vibe design, let me know in the comments, because this actually would be pretty damn cool. I kind of like this game now. Anyway, for now, we're going to stick to design. So we're going to copy this and move over to ChatGPT. I like O3 personally. That's my favorite of the ChatGPT tools. So I'm going to give it a prompt and tell it that I'm going to want to design a website for this. And the first thing we're going to do before anything else is just come up with 4 or 5 web pages that will be the structure of the website. All right, so the longest part of this is obviously typing out the prompts, which I will spare you the details of that. Hi, I need to design the website for a new game I'm making called Purgatorio, full description below. It's got to be a cool, unique design with all the pages living in the same color space and flowing logically from one to another. We have many steps, but the first is simply to come up with the outline of the site's pages. So in other words, we need an outline of the website. We'll start at index.html where the potential game player lands, and the flow should funnel us to a buy now page where the player can buy the game, because obviously we want to market this game to people and have them buy it. Let's say we need about 5 pages on this website. What would those be and how would they link to each other? So you can see that it's clearly answering that question right here. So we've got index.html, home, the descent begins. I kind of like that. Story.html, so the world of Purgatorio, that's cool. Gameplay, how it plays. Media, screenshots, and trailer hub. I like that. So gallery filled with screenshots. I had thought about that. That's cool. And then buy, pre-order, final conversion page with edition chooser, etc., etc., etc. So I like this flow logic here. So we've got a landing page, we immerse the person, see it in action, we convince them by showing them the gameplay and things like that. Salivate, I kind of love that. Media.html excites visually and orally with strong buy now CTA. Convert by.html minimizes friction, seals the deal. And then throughout, a top navigation bar keeps all 5 pages one click away, and a persistent color theme buy now button travels with the user on every page except by.html itself, where it's replaced by the checkout component. All pages share the same, okay, all of these kinds of things. So now I'm going to go ahead and give it a description. I'll go ahead and copy the description from Claude Opus, and I'm going to ask it to create a color palette for this website. So what we need is a color palette of 8 to 10 colors with a base background color, which could be a dark gray, or maybe it's some sort of lava color, I don't know, something like that. And it moves up the scale to very, very light. But all of those colors, this is the design work part of it, they all need to live together in a color space so that they look good together. So we'll start with that. All right, so I said, nice, I like the outline. Let's not go with monochrome, however, because I just want to make it more interesting. I want a kind of hell theme for this with a color palette that goes from very dark to very light with 8 to 10 colors that are web-friendly hex colors or gradients. Please give them names for easier identification. I found that that's very necessary. If you just have hex color, 0F17 or something like that, that's difficult. Anyway, and all worked well together as a unified color palette. I like a red lava theme as the basis, but this might be too over the top. Let me know what you think. For the first step, just make me an HTML page with color swatches so we can examine all the color swatches together and determine their aesthetic qualities. So you can see it started answering in the canvas, which is perfectly fine. So I'll go back here. For this first step, just make me an HTML page with color swatches so we can examine all the color swatches together and determine their aesthetic qualities. For your information, here's the game's full spec to give you a better idea of the game itself. So this is what came from Claude Opus over there. And that is the full game's specification and so forth. So anyway, let's wait till this thing finishes. You can see it's creating a relatively straightforward HTML document with all the swatches. And look at how easy this is. We click the preview button and voila. So here we have our color palette here. Abyssal Black, Charred Crimson. I like the names. These two guys don't have names, unfortunately, so we'll need that. So we need names for the last two. They also look almost identical. If we click stop, we can go down here. So Scorched Amber would be down at the bottom. Seared Gold, Scorched Amber, Ashen Smoke. For some reason that didn't get actually printed. I'm not sure why. So you can see the last two do actually have distinctive hex codes, but I think they're a little bit too similar looking, and for some reason it didn't print the actual names of it. So let's go take a look again. So I'm going to ask it to create, I'm just going to have it recreate the second one here. So whatever that one's called, I guess that's Ashen Smoke. So that one, I'm going to have it redo that as a slightly darker color. I think aside from that, I kind of like it, but I'm also going to ask it if it can make a gradient for me as well. All right, so I asked it to actually place the labels in the last two colors so we can actually see them, and also to make the Ashen Smoke a little bit darker and or more saturated. And then I asked it if it could do a gradient, because I kind of like to do a gradient across the background rather than just have a single color like black, but we'll see what it can do with that. So let's take a look. It's actually working on that. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to generate a few sample images. So unfortunately, Claude does not actually generate images, but it will give me some nice prompts, and I'm going to bring Grok into things now, and we'll go ahead and ask Grok to build us some images here. So we'll take Claude's description and ask it to generate an image of this, and we will see how it works. I find Grok's image generation to be quite good. So anyway, we're using a bunch of different tools here, as you can see, to be able to do this vibe design. Okay, this is absolutely not going to work. That's a little bit first of all, it's not first person, and second of all, I don't like the colors, and third of all, I don't think a Renaissance person is going to have a looks like an AK or something like that. So that's not going to work. Alrighty, so we got a couple of gradients, which I really like here. That's very cool. So we go Abyssal Black to Abyssal Gradient. That's nice. And we've got an Infernal Gradient, and we've also got Soul Light and Ethereal Glow. And it's actually placed the text and the hex codes directly on the swatches. So I really like that. That's very, very nice. So we're now going to use these swatches to build out the index.html page. Okay, so I gave Grok better instructions here, and I said, let me give you the game spec, and I gave it some more instructions and things. So I don't know if it'll directly generate an image at this point, but it should actually respond to this and think about it for a while. All right, so I forgot to turn this into a project at the beginning, so you should probably have done that. I don't know if it will be able to turn this into a project sort of midstream, so we will see what happens with that. Sorry, that's my fault. I was just starting too quickly, wasn't really thinking about that. But what you want to do normally is start a new project, which is just as easy as start a new project, and then you can put multiple pages inside that. But anyway, I said, I want the index.html. I want it to use the color palette. There should be graphics, but we don't need them just yet, so placeholder, so it'll just have the question mark icon there. Also, I thought, why not? Let's add some music to this page so we'd have a theme song for our game at some point. So I want that there so it can place the music there, even though the music isn't there yet. There's a place for it to put it in there, and a mute button at the top. And I just gave it a reminder, this web page does not need to be functional, right? We're just designing at this point. We're only designing the look. And also remember that we need to build the other pages to match this one in time. So I gave Grok another try. It does not seem to be doing a particularly good job here. So I may turn to ChatGPT and see if it can understand the instructions better, because Grok does not seem to be getting it. Although I do like this little dude in the bottom here. This looks like a little health icon or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think it honestly would be okay if it just didn't have the person with the gun. I don't know why it insists on having a gun in this game. And okay, so this is what ChatGPT 03 came up with. I'm sorry, I'm covering up part of this. Let me move it out of the way. So cannot preview your code, whatever. Okay, I'm going to move myself out of the way for just a second. So you've got feature. So you've got, this would be a placeholder for the actual images that would go in there. There's a buy now button. There's a watch trailer button. There is a mute button that doesn't appear to work at this point, but that's fine. I said we didn't need to have anything. So none of this stuff actually works at this point, but these would be the actual buttons that you would have. So again, this is design. This is not, we're not trying to do this as a functional web page at this point. That would be for a later stage. But as long as we're looking at this, it looks like there's a bug. So we'll go ahead and fix the bug instantly without even having to understand what the bug is, which is really, really lovely. I appreciate that because it makes it a lot easier. So while we're looking at that, while it's thinking about the bug and fixing that bug, I'm going to go ahead and look here. So we've got the abyssal gradient, the infernal gradient. So right, it's got the different colors that we had chosen. Oh, there's a bunch of syntax errors. So variable BGM. So anyway, hopefully it'll be able to figure that out. I appreciate that when you look at that, it just gives you a quick little button that you can push and you can just fix the problem. You don't even have to understand what the problem is. So I assume, yeah, it's going back and retyping this. The one thing that tends to happen with ChatGPT is over time, it will actually overwrite these, darken per latest palette tweak. Interesting. So some of this stuff, it like overwrites, which is very annoying. So I tend to make copies of this. You can actually click the undo button up here, but sometimes it doesn't undo properly. So I would suggest from time to time, make a copy of this and just copy it into a text document like Microsoft Word or text editor or whatever. It doesn't have to be anything in particular because it's just a text file, but I have found that sometimes it will go over the top. And also that ChatGPT, when it gets off the rails, I can take the code, copy it over to Claude Opus. I can tell Claude Opus to fix it, and it usually does a fantastic job of fixing it, and it will preview it in that as well. So in the meantime, I'm going to open up another ChatGPT webpage, and I'm going to copy the information that I was trying to use in Grok and not getting the right results, see if we get some better images to put in here. All right, so we'll see if ChatGPT 03 does a little bit better job of generating an image than Grok did. Grok, it was decent images, but it was just not the right thing. So obviously it was an audio problem, the background music and stuff, so we can go ahead and click preview. Can I preview your code bug fix again? So interesting that it was the same problem. Again, it may not matter at this point because we don't really particularly care what it is. I am curious audio. Oh, so it doesn't seem to be happy with that at this point because it's actually giving us the right look. I don't particularly care, but it would be nice to fix this problem. Oh, so interesting. I had kind of copied and pasted what Claude Opus gave me, and it did say isometric and first person. So that's interesting. I think that's why Grok was getting all confused here. Yeah, although even without me giving the rest of the information, it did seem to do isometric. So yeah, we'll need to clarify that game spec needs to be fixed clearly. All right, so after a while, it thinks it's fixed it. Let's see, X out. Yep, no more bugs. Good. Okay, so this did look like it reacted for a second, but then it didn't do anything. So anyway, that doesn't matter. So anyway, you can see here the basic layout of the web page. And I also like that we have a little copyright down, Infernal Engine Studios. Nice. So now we're Infernal Engine Studios here officially. All right, and after thinking for a while, it came up with what I think, that one's a little bit too bright. I kind of like this darker look, and I love the green. That's sort of awesome. So anyway, I really like that idea. And of course we can generate others, but now I'm going to turn back to the design of this thing. I'm going to say, let's do the story page. Now I'm just going to do one more in the interest of time, but you can see how this would work. You just do it for every one of these pages. You write exciting text that tells the player how they'll interact and why this game is the coolest ever. Good graphics should abound, just placeholders for now, but suggest what images should go in each placeholder. And we should still have the music in the background with the mute button. And of course, the navigation should still be available. The color palette should remain the same, and the buy button should be ever present because of course we want somebody to buy our game. And then I went ahead and added that gameplay image. I was like, that's kind of cool. And of course I always say thank you because I want the AI to remember that I was nice to it when the time comes. All right, so it should hopefully open up a canvas in just a minute. I had closed the canvas down. You can always open it back up by clicking this little button up here in the corner, but it should just do that on its own once it actually gets to the coding stage of things. All right, and as you can see, it thought about it for a while and now it's actually generating this stuff, and I believe, hopefully this is all the same. I would have to go check. But the good part about it is because it's just in root, what you can do is once you get one that you like, you can copy it and paste it. If it tends, for some reason, once in a while, it just goes off the rails and it just changes these codes. And so you get a slightly different color palette. So just a word to the wise as you're working on this stuff. But you can see this is a much more complex page that it's generating already just by looking at it. And of course, if you don't know HTML or CSS or JavaScript or anything like that at all, it doesn't really matter because again, we're just vibe designing here. It doesn't make a difference at all if you understand this because you just press the preview button once it finishes. And I'll just call out here while it's typing this stuff out, notice background music replace source. So you can change this assets audio main theme.mp3 to wherever you want to have it, and that's perfectly fine. So you can put that in there. And the same of course goes with the images. You'd put those in the placeholder spots. All right, and we're done. Let's see how it did. So preview, lore, and legend. And we've got a nice scroll thing here. So, all right, fraud, treachery. We've got buy now up at the top. We got buy now, ready to carve your legend in hell. This button actually does something. Okay, it doesn't do anything. That's unfortunate. I don't have a way to go back. So obviously it doesn't work at this point. Let's go ahead and preview this again. So we've got a portrait illustration of Lucrezia Torriani, the Heretics Pact in a candlelit Florentine laboratory. Lucrezia performs a blasphemous rite. Oh, okay. I mean, I love it. I'm more and more interested in like designing this game because this is kind of fun. So anyway, you can mute this. I'd prefer the little icon again, but it's a little different. But you've got home story. So you can navigate right here very quickly. You've got the name of it. That stays in its own cell up here. You've got the Heretics Pact. So we get the story. Hell reacts to you. We've got the placeholder images. I guess it never did put the placeholder in there. I want some more images, so I'm going to ask it to do that. But aside from that, I really like this. So I'm going to say add an image below each of these. So these are the 9 circles of hell, I think I'd have to remember. But limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, all the good stuff. And then by the end, you get way down to the actual devil. So I'm going to ask it to put an image placeholder underneath each one of these. All right, so I said this is great, but can you put an image placeholder under each of the circles descriptions? For example, under limbo, I want a screenshot of the character swirling around and being taught the controls, etc. Because I believe limbo, I think it was like a big circle. It's been a long time since I've read the Inferno. I need to do that again. It's a really, really good book. Anyway, again, just need a placeholder for now, but with a suggestion of what image should go there. And hopefully, just like we had before, we'll have hero placeholder.jpg. We'll get suggestions from the variable names or something of what image should go there. So you can see it's rewriting everything. Let's go back up here. I think we're still good. Oh no, you can see that it actually lost one of the gradients. So we've lost, see, this is what I was talking about. It's really weird how it just loses track of this stuff. So when it happens like this, O3 gets off the rails at some point. What I usually do is I just switch over to Claude and I just copy and paste the HTML there. And Claude is just, it's better at these long range projects than O3, but I find O3 is a good place to start. So again, I'm using all these tools at hand. I could be using Imogen from Gemini. That would have worked perfectly well, although I think the hell theme, I don't know. It's very tweaky about specific types of images that it'll render. Certainly Grok would have done a better job if I'd given it a better description. ChatGPT did well for this, but it kind of gets off the rails because it loses track of some of these palette things, which is annoying because that's one of the things you want to keep consistent. And then Claude, I find just a really good sort of long-term project builder. So you can use all of these tools in conjunction with each other to do this design. And I think it makes it work really, really well. I am not an advocate of using only one tool for all of this. I think using multiple tools is the way to go. All right. And interestingly enough, you can see that it actually, as far as I can tell, did not put images underneath here. All right, so just to show you real quick, I pop back over to Claude here. I pasted in the other HTML, but replaced the color palette with the proper one. And then I asked it to fix this web page. So let's take a look at what Opus can do with this. All right, and after thinking for a couple of minutes, it actually gave me this page and it automatically, played it for me. Interestingly enough, it's got a console message of uncaught error, script error, and I think it might be actually fixing that right now in the background, but it looks really good. I love this gradient here. So you've got, the Heretics pack with the candle lit thing. I think if I move this over, maybe it'll look a little bit better anyway. So you've got the portrait of Lucrezia, hell reacts to you, commit greed, and rivers of things. So you've got images, the 9 circles, and you can see how the gradient is going from very dark to, as we get to the bottom, a very kind of hellish, kind of orange color, which I really love. But anyway, you can see now we've got these images, fraud image, violence images, heresy image, wrath image, all of that kind of stuff. So it's done a better job. So like I said, I tend to pop back and forth between O3 and Claude in terms of designing this kind of thing, but you can see we could do this and we can work all day because we could, of course, think about other things that we could do as well. We can generate the images. Of course, generally speaking, the images would come from the game itself, but in this case, I would just sort of generate the images and place them in there. All right, and just to see how it would do, I ask it to put an image in this spot. So let's see if it's actually able to do that. No, there is some funkiness with HTML in terms of the way that it's actually able to grab assets off of things. So you probably would want to run this off a local host and stuff like that instead. And by the way, if you want to do that, you can ask ChatGPT. And so you can see here that what it says is you need to change this to limbo scholars graveyard.jpg, place it in the same directory as your HTML file. So, right, it gives you instructions. It can only run the most basic HTML in this sort of situation because it just can't access the assets. So basically you can put these assets in, you can copy this, you can run it in VS Code as a local host or something along those lines. And so you can get more in depth as you want to go. But I just wanted to show you the basics of how this works. You can see it's very easy. It's a lot of fun. You can come up with these great color swatches. You can come up with the outline of the website. Hell, you can come up with the game. I mean, again, I really love the idea of this game. I think it's kind of fun. I love the idea of an alchemical renaissance-y sort of weapons and things like that as you descend through hell and you have to make it out to go to purgatory or to heaven or something. And of course, the sequel game would be Purgatory as opposed to the Inferno. So I'm thinking as opposed to Purgatorio, the first one should just be called Dante's Inferno or something like that. And we can go on from there. Anywho, that's not really the point of this video. The point is just how easy it is to make these designs, to make things consistent, to make it your own, not just something that's just a boring repeat of what everybody else does, but make your own design for a website or other things. It's pretty fantastic what this can do. So anyway, that's what I've got for you in terms of vibe designing. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. If you have ideas to further this sort of design work, let me know that as well. I would love to hear from you about that. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps YouTube's algorithm a lot. And of course, if you want to see more of this kind of content, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.